most commented comments on the channel or even the DMs that I get in my Instagram is that, Anchal, if you could just pick one book, which book would you pick? Which is why in today's video I will tell you which is the book I would pick if I could pick only one book from each genre. Hey you guys, welcome back to the channel. I hope you're doing very nice. I'm sending a lot of hugs and positivity to all of you. Hi, if you're new, welcome to the channel. I really hope you enjoy the content. If you do, please do consider subscribing. I went on Google and I found a list of genres, but then there were so many genres which I don't think I have read. Plus there were so many genres that were not there on Google, but I have read them. I consider them a genre, and so with the mix and match, I have come up with 21 genres. That means I'm going to pick out 21 books. Mind you, the romance genre is not there in this video because I recently did a video where I'm recommending romance books. I realized that romance is a very big umbrella under which a lot of things and a lot of tropes come, and so because of the mix of these two things, I decided to not include it in this video. But if you guys do want me to pick what book I would pick if I could pick only one book per trope, I'm ready to do it. So comment it down below if you want it or not. But for today, let's start picking out one book per genre. Guess the first genre we're starting with. What do you think? Pause and put in the comments. I'll see. Whoever is guessing it right, I do give you a virtual hug for guessing right. The first genre is thrillers. Usually when I'm making YouTube videos of like book recommendations or reading thrillers for a week, which I did a few days back, I put all of the books like thrillers, crime, suspense, dark books, psychological thrillers, political thrillers, all under one video only, because I feel like they sort of like go together with each other. Like when you are being thrilled, there is mystery, and sometimes a crime book can be very thrilling. But in this video I couldn't just pick one book. Oh, this is the one thriller book I like, because that's just way too unfair to all of the other, and I don't want to pick just one book, which is why I have divided them into a lot of categories, and we're just gonna start with thrillers. I think the one book that I would pick for thriller, one book that I can think of straight up in my mind, is The Last Word by Taylor Adams. Every single page of this book, right from the first word, is thrilling. It's spooky and it's gross and it is dark, but it's also extremely thrilling. I've never felt this sort of adrenaline rush while reading a book, because I just wanted to know what is going to happen, but also because it was thrilling throughout and the plot was amazing. Oh, I do want to give a special mention to The American Boyfriend also by Ivy Niao. This one too was such a crazy thriller. The only reason I'm not picking this first is because the first 100 pages were not that thrilling, but after like 100 pages, when everything starts connecting together and you see what actually happened, this is one of the most thrilling books with like so many plot twists that I've ever read. So a special mention for this. Next up we have crime, and for crime I will choose, I think I can't choose anybody but Agatha Christie for crime. I think that if there was only one book that I had to choose, even from the huge collection of Agatha Christie books that I have read, it's not huge or whatever, is Peril at End House, because it was also very entertaining and funny and there was crime in it. Actually Agatha Christie books are psychological thrillers, crime thrillers, suspense thrillers, mystery thrillers, all of it in one. But the way she writes crime, nobody writes it. Like I do not know who else writes crime like this, so I'm going to choose Peril at End House. Next up we have a dark book. Let me think. I would go with a Lisa Jewell book, but also I don't think even Lisa Jewell books are as dark as Gillian Flynn books. Sharp Objects by Gillian Flynn is just so insanely dark. It's also gross, but it's so insanely dark that I have never read a darker book, and I read it at night, so it sort of also had an impact on me like that. So if I was to choose just one dark book, I would choose Sharp Objects. Special mention to Lisa Jewell books, obviously. Then She Was Gone, that too is one of the darkest books I have ever read in my entire life. The Family Upstairs was almost not dark at all compared to this one. That one is like more like a psychological thriller. This one is just so dark. It's crazy. I'm clearly not just picking one book. What is wrong with me? Next up we have mystery, and for mystery I do have one book, but not the one book that I would choose, you know. I'm actually gonna go with Rock Paper Scissors by Alice Feeney. This one is more about the ending, and there's like a mystery throughout the book, and you keep thinking that you have it figured out, but you don't, and you come to know what the mystery is in the end. I do not know if this qualifies as a mystery conventionally or not, but this was a mystery for me the entire book, and then the plot twist in the end obviously were crazy, but it was not that thrilling throughout the book, where I'm like, oh my god, did this just happen? Oh my god, did that just happen? No, it was more about the ending. I do have more genres related to thrillers, but we're gonna come back to that. Before that, we're gonna talk about LGBTQIA+. One LGBTQIA+, that book that I would choose, that has my heart. It has my heart. The first book that comes to mind, I'll choose Loveless. Loveless by Alice Oseman is one of the best LGBTQIA+ books I have ever read, majorly because it doesn't also fall under the romance category, and when I am going to recommend romance books, in that when I talk about LGBTQIA+, I will talk about a romance book. But when it comes to just LGBTQIA+, learning more about it, accepting yourself, all of those things, I think it's Loveless by Alice Oseman, one of the best books I've ever read. YA LGBTQIA+, Loveless is YA, so I should choose it for YA LGBTQIA+. But do I have any adult LGBTQIA+ in my mind? Our main character in this book is also trying to find himself and accept himself as a trans in the world, how people look at him, what they think about him, what he thinks about himself, about his dreams, and it's such a nice book. It's such a cozy book, so I'll pick this one. Always the Almost by Edward Underhill. You should read this book. It's so good. Like, it's so pretty, but apart from that, it's also so good. Next up, we have a literary fiction book. If I could only choose one literary fiction, literary fiction is basically more about the plot. Literary fiction is usually more about the characters than the plot. Obviously, you have other literary genres too, but just literary fiction, if I was to choose only one book, obviously we have 40 Rules of Love. That is literary fiction. I would choose Extremely Loud and Incredibly Close by Jonathan Safran Foer. I'm pretty sure I'm not taking the name right, but this is one of the best literary fiction books I've ever read. It did not even feel like a literary fiction because of just how adorable it was. It's the story of this 9-year-old whose father dies in 9/11. They used to go on so many adventures, but then now that his father is dead, he's not gone into his room since a long time. But then when he does go in the room, he finds this key and he thinks that his father has left him with one last adventure. And our 9-year-old Oscar starts to find out which lock does that one key open. And I thought that this is a thriller, honestly, and it's going to be all thrilling, like, oh, which lock does it open? But it turned out to be a literary fiction in the best way ever, because Oscar lives, like, literally a part of my heart is Oscar, whatever happened to him. And just like a 9-year-old going through all of that. Wait, was he 9 or 12? I'm sorry. Yeah, 9. Just a 9-year-old going through that. It breaks my heart. So if I were just to pick one book, it would be this. Next up, we have YA Lit Fic. What is wrong with me? I have YA Lit Fic here. This is YA Lit Fic. If I had to just pick one adult Lit Fic, it would be... God, this is hard. Like, this is hard. My literary fictions. Oh, we have Cleopatra and Frankenstein. I don't know if I would want to, like, keep reading it. We have tomorrow. One literary... This is the most difficult thing for me because literary fiction is one of my favorite genres ever. Like, I almost like every single literary fiction I read. A Little Life, I think, is literary fiction. Oh my god. Wow, I've never been this stunned in my life. Like, I don't know what to do. I am going to go with Anxious People by Frederick Beckman. I was going to say Frederick Backman, because this is again one literary fiction that did not feel like a literary fiction. It's about these 7 strangers who are caught up in a house because a robbery goes wrong. There is so much commentary in this about so many things, and just like some quotes and some things which just blow your mind. But usually the reason people don't go into literary fiction is because it gets boring. But this one does not get boring at all, and it's not that slow paced. It's literally one of the best books I've ever read in my entire life. So if I was to just pick one literary fiction book, it would be this. But I do want to give a special mention to Woman Eating by Claire Kohda. This one is a little bit slow is the thing, and it's very, very character driven, like extremely character driven. It's about this vampire woman who has decided to not feed on humans, but she's really, really hungry. So you see what happens with that. She has this obsession with food, especially human food, what human beings eat. eat, and you see her relationship with food, you see her relationship with her parents, the way she's been brought up, and all of these amazing things. It's such a layered read. It's one of my most favorite books ever. I feel like I talked about this more than Anxious People, so I don't know which one. Actually I think fine, I'll pick this one if I just had to read one. Okay, I'm sorry, I picked this one. It was just so good. I picked it up right now and I got reminded of how much I loved this book. Anxious People gets a special mention because it's entertaining. The thing with Lit Fic is that it gets slow, right? And people don't like that, but I like that, so I'm gonna choose what book I like, right? So I'm gonna choose Woman Eating. Next up we have a literary thriller. I don't even have to think about this. I recently finished, like literally I think a day ago or something, finished reading Kala by Colin Walsh. They're these 6 friends who have not met for 20 years since the death of one of these friends, and after 20 years they come to town for different reasons, and the one who died is called Kala. But when they return to town, simultaneously the bones of Kala are found, and then you see what actually happened with Kala. Now the highlights of this book are all of the characters. It's said from 3 POVs of 3 of the friends. Grey characters, awesomely grey characters. The way Kala is not even like alive in this book and still she has an impact. Mosh is one of my most favorite characters ever. I will never forget that. I will never forget him. And even though it is a thriller and like a crime book, because it is also literary, it does get slow because it is character focused, but it gets slow and literary in the best way ever. One of those books which you can read as a thriller, though it is going to get slow, but you can also peel the onion, get into the layers, have your own interpretations as to what is going on. It has an Irish backdrop. I've not read a lot of them. I think I've just read 2 or 3 other books, but it's always very fresh, it's very new, it's different from everything else that I read. So yeah, Kala. I will only pick this book. I cannot even think about any other book. Next up we have fantasy and YA fantasy. In fantasy, I think for YA fantasy I will go with 6 of Crows and Crooked Kingdom because they are YA. This is a YA fantasy, so it's not a question. I mean, you should already know that. No, I'm kidding. I would pick these books any day because this is literally one of the best series I've ever read in my entire life, and it's YA, and I think that is one of the reasons why I got so attached. Like, I did not focus on this, but it's YA fantasy and I love YA ordinarily so much that I got a different attachment to this series. And then we have adult fantasy. I really wish I was making this video a few days later because I am binging on fantasy right now, but I can't think of an adult fantasy. I think I'm gonna go with Wrath and Dawn. I don't think that this is adult because I think the characters are younger than 18, but it's a story of a king and a queen, and that's just something that adults do, like have these responsibilities. Also the love story is very adulty, also the politics in the second book, the war, it's all very adult stuff, so I'm gonna go with this. Next we have a political thriller, and no questions about this one. I wouldn't think of any other book. It's Yellowface by Rebecca F. Kuang. I have never read a political thriller that I have loved so much. First of all, the whole political thing in itself I'm not the biggest fan of, though I think recently I am becoming a fan, but like generally I'm not the biggest fan of. But Yellowface was entertaining. It did get slow a little bit here and there because it's a political thriller, not just a thriller, but it was so worth it, and all the tea it has spilled about the publishing industry and everything, it's just so good. Next up we have a historical fiction. I'm editing the video right now, and the book I chose was The Boy in Striped Pajamas, but I have to change my answer. I don't know why it did not hit me while I was shooting, but I think if I could only choose one historical fiction, I would choose The Kite Runner by Khalid Hosseini. This one just has a hold on my heart that will never ever leave. It's one of the best historical fiction books ever, and I love it. It's the closest to my heart. Then we have women's fiction, another no-brainer. I have read a lot of women's fiction which is like literally awesome, but the one I would choose if I could choose only one is Lessons in Chemistry by Bonnie Garmus. There are good people, there are bad people, there's power, there's powerless people. It's just such a wholesome book to read when it comes to what it is like, and it's also historical fiction, so what it was like to be a scientist while you're a woman in the 1960s. It was empowering and also very emotional. I think it was such an amazing mix of all of the things that I love it. So I would choose this one. Next up, we have Indian mythology. I've obviously talked about so many other Indian mythology books before, and they're so good, but if I could just choose one book that sort of got me into Indian mythology, is Kavita Kane's Ahalya's Awakening. I don't think I've talked about this book enough. Like, now that I'm talking about it, I'm like, I've not talked about this book enough. It is a story of Ahalya, who was turned into stone because her husband cursed her, but you get to see things from her perspective. It's a retelling, and it's one of the most beautiful retellings ever. Why have I not talked about this book? It's such a good book, such a good book. It's Ahalya's story from birth to whatever happens to her, and the way she realizes who she is and she embraces herself, and the story of empowerment, also the injustice that happens with her, but how she takes it. It's all so inspiring, so beautiful, so heartbreaking, so tragic, but also I felt very, very close to Ahalya after this. I will never forget this book, and now I'm going to recommend it 1,000 times now that I've been reminded of it. Next up, we have Greek mythology. For Greek mythology, you would think that I'll pick Song of Achilles, but I won't. I need entertainment and everything Greek mythology when I'm reading Greek mythology. I think Song of Achilles would come when I'm making the romance video, but for Greek mythology, I would pick Girl, Goddess, Queen by Bea Fitzgerald. This thick-ass book is such a wholesome book. It's a story of Persephone and Hades. Everybody says that she was dragged to hell by Hades, but that is just simply not true. She chose to go to hell. She jumped. So you get to see what happens after that, how she was not even allowed to get out of her house, out of her island for the longest time when she was a girl, but then you see her journey to becoming a goddess and a queen, and she becomes the queen of the underworld, and it's just all so good. There are these different gods, there's politics, there's power, there's drama, there's love, everything. It's the mix of everything. It's one of the best books I've ever read in my entire life when it comes to Greek mythology. I read it so quickly and it was so entertaining. So if I could just recommend one book, I would recommend this. Next, we have contemporary fiction. For contemporary fiction, it's none other than Eleanor Oliphant is completely fine. This can also qualify as literary fiction, but it was not that literary for me, honestly. Like, I did not see a lot of commentary. It was just so darkly funny, and Eleanor's journey, so I think it comes under contemporary fiction for me. Contemporary fiction is basically when you can't really define or put the book into one genre. It's just fiction, and that is what this one is for me. I have so many other books, but the first book that pops up in my mind is Eleanor Oliphant, because it's just so heartbreaking again, but also funny. Eleanor is just such a weird character in the beginning of the book, but as time passes, she becomes like this adorable character, and when you see her past and you come to know what the meaning of the cover is, it's insane. Now I'm getting tired. The next book is children's fiction, which is one of my favorite genres. I think I'm going to go, I don't know if it qualifies as, I don't know anything. Okay, I don't know a lot, but I think I would pick The Girl Who Drank the Moon by Kelly Barnhill. I saw that 10 years plus children can read it, so is it children's fiction? I think it is. I just felt so magical. I felt like a child when I was oh no, this is not it. Okay, this gets a special mention definitely, because it made me feel so magical, but this is definitely not it. I am going to choose The Boy in the Back of the Class by Anjali Q. Rao. I don't care, just leave everything else and pick this book up, even if you are an adult, and definitely for children. This is the story of the boy in the back of the class who does not smile. His country was at war and now he's a refugee, and then we have our main character of the book who is just trying to make him smile, and we see what happens with that, and it's the best children's fiction ever. I love it. Like, you have to read this one. I forgot to talk about this in my 6-star reads. How did that happen? It's one of the best books ever. You have to read it. Then we have classic. Classic I've not read much. The book that comes in my mind is Little Women. Pride and Prejudice also is very special to me, but if I only had to read one book, it would be Little Women. And if I had to recommend one book, it would be Little Women. It's over there. I'm not going to go and get it because it's just so messy, but it's Little Women. And last but not the least, we have a memoir. Now, I have so many amazing memoirs. I am going to say The Diary of a Young Girl by Anne Frank. I don't know if it's an autobiography or a memoir. It is such a beautiful book. It is the story of Anne Frank when she is holed up in a place during the World War II, and it's a real story. So like, everything is burning down around her, but her and her family along with 2 other families are staying in one room, which is like, I think half the size of my room or something, which is crazy. Just reading the perspective again of a 13-year-old, especially when it is real, and seeing her going through things like an actual 13-year-old girl in like the normal world, but it's all tainted by so many other things that's happening around her, and it's her journal entry, so it's raw as fuck. So it's just so good that if it counts as a memoir, I'm going to be choosing The Diary of a Young Girl. Obviously, if that doesn't, or a special mention is for I Am by Maggie O'Farrell. These are the 17 incidents that she has with death, where she faces death but then she escapes death, and again, very hauntingly beautifully written. It's such a beautiful book, a must read. I would pick that one any day. And with that, we come towards the end of the video. I really hope you guys enjoyed the video. I'm sorry if the video is boring, but you guys asked for it, so here it is. I love you guys so much. I feel like I should include one more genre, which is like a genre defying book, but I've only read like 3 or 4 genre defying books, so I'm not going to include it. So that's it. I'll see you guys again very, very soon. Bye.